Welcome back to New World Next Week. I'm James Corbett of CorbettReport.com.
And I'm James Evan Pilato of MediaMonarchy.com. A closer examination suggests it may serve to acclimate students to compliance. We've got that story, plus the cure for U.S. AIDS. But first, on this episode 581 of New Decade This Week, gold bulls lock in on the glittering milestone of $3,000 an ounce. It's in sight. U.S. President Donald Trump's latest tariff threats have ignited another gold rush, propelling the safe haven metal to new heights and bringing the glittering $3,000 milestone an ounce into view. Spot gold climbed to a record $29,1130 a troy ounce on Monday, its seventh peak record to date in 2025, which is pretty young last time I checked. Price is already up nearly 11% so far this year after a staggering 27% gain in 2024. Trump said on Sunday he'll introduce new 25% tariffs on all steel and aluminum imports into the U.S. Aluminum, adding that he will announce reciprocal tariffs, applying them to all countries and matching the tariff rates levied by each country. Gold is very clearly targeting the $3,000 level, and the market is incredibly strong, almost relentless. Now it's only a question of when it will scale the level and not if it will. Independent analysis from Roy Norman. One should expect to see retracement on profit-taking, but we never do, which reflects that underlying momentum. Very, very powerful. The tariff plans are broadly viewed as inflationary and capable of sparking trade wars, thereby increasing the demand for safe haven assets like bullion, traditionally regarded as a hedge against inflation and geopolitical instability. Worry over import tariff plans materialized in U.S. gold futures, with key contracts trading at a premium spot price, currently at about $28. London bullion market players are racing to borrow gold from central banks. London bullion market players are racing to borrow gold from central banks, which store bullion in London. I assume this is the city of London, following a surge in gold deliveries to the United States, a source told Reuters. Gold in the Bank of England vault is trading at a discount to the wider market. This has seen weeks-long queues to withdraw the metal. Weeks-long lineups to be able to get your physical metal out. Global bullion banks flying gold into the United States from trading hubs catering to Asian consumers, including Dubai and Hong Kong, to capitalize on the unusually high premium. Gold in COMEX-approved warehouses stood at 34.6 million ounces, a more than 90% rise since late November and their highest levels since June 2022. The London Bullion Market Association also reported last Friday the amount of gold stored in London vaults fell 1.7% month-on-month to 8,000-some metric tons. Analysts and traders have noted that central bank demand will remain robust in 2025 and propel prices further. Central banks bought more than 1,000 tons of the metal for the third year in a row in 2024. This according to the World Gold Council, James, whose ads I've seen on sports ball breaks this last year. To drive things home, it's like it's on the regular TV commercials of like, hey, you should probably get into some gold. In related news, world's second largest gold storage suddenly has very long lines to withdraw bars. That's from CNN. London gold market defaults on physical gold deliveries. That from goldbroker.com. James, is it the new gold rush? Too cliche?
Something is happening, and I think this speaks to a broader phenomenon that's happening. But yes, just even drilling down into the specifics of what's been happening to gold for the past few weeks is really crazy. You have backwardation in the London bullion market, which means that it's actually been cheaper, essentially. The price you will get for gold in London is less than what you would get in America. Plus, with all of the people moving gold back into America, that has created these long lines at the BOE people trying to get their gold out of those vaults. But they're like, oh, well, this physical gold is a big process to, we have to have security and we have to transfer and it's a big deal. So it's going to take 4 to 8 weeks in order to deliver your physical gold, which that Gold Broker article we're linking up notes is, in fact, a de facto default on physical gold deliveries. They point out that for years, Andrew Maguire has been pointing out that the official rules of the exchange for physical between the COMEX and the London bullion market require delivery within 14 days. He even gave a presentation on the subject in the House of Commons thus challenging the government. The fact that the BOE can only deliver gold before 4 to 8 weeks is, in a way, equivalent to a default. The term failure may seem too blunt, but the reality remains the same. Anyway, long story short, some really remarkable things happening in the gold markets right now, but I think that speaks to the broader picture, actually going back to what we were talking about last week with the Panama Canal stuff and the sort of the trade wars and all of this stuff that's floating around in the zeitgeist right now is speaking to an era in which we're living through an incredible changeover in monetary paradigm, as I have pointed out before. And let me check. When was the last time we had, horrible inflation, people rushing for gold, geopolitical instability? Oh, right, the 1930s. And how did that culminate? Oh, right, World War II. And, of course, after World War II, what was one of the main feathers in the cap of the new world order post-World War II, the Bretton Woods system, and now we're going to tie everything to the US dollar. But don't worry, the US dollar is backed by gold until it isn't. Anyway, so this is what we are looking at, incredibly topsy-turvy time in which we are looking at the possible changeover of world reserve currency. I was going to write about all of this in my newsletter this weekend, but I've been under the weather the past couple of days, unless you can't tell, so I may not put out a newsletter this weekend, but somebody out there should, so I hope someone will take up this ball and run with it, because I think this is an incredibly important story.
James, I am not a financial expert. This is not financial advice. But you and I, we've talked a little bit about this off mic. I moved most of my BTC into gold last summer. Thankfully, teamed up actually with someone I met through Richard Grove's Tragedy and Hope, through that community. A lot of interesting things going on. And that's how we get going on this New World Next Week, episode 581, as we've now keep referring to it the last few weeks, New Decade Next Week. USAID bankrolled secretive nonprofit global news network with alleged ties to Epstein, drug running, censorship. U.S. Agency for International Development, the hated USAID, gave roughly $473 million to a secretive nonprofit organization that supported efforts to censor social media users, according to documents released by who? WikiLeaks. This is an episode for the ages, James. This news comes as less than a week after President Donald Trump cut major funding to USAID amid revelations the organization financed groups, including some media outlets, Politico for one, that engaged in smear campaigns and censorship against dissident voices. In a February 7th post, WikiLeaks revealed, quote, USAID has pushed nearly $500 million, $472.6 million, through a secretive U.S. government-financed NGO, non-governmental organization, Internews Network, IN, which has worked with 4,291 media outlets, produced in 1 year 4,799 hours of broadcasts, and reached up to 778 million people, and training over 9,000 journalists. That's 2023 figures. IN has also supported social media censorship initiatives. Internews Network, IN, has 30 international offices, including headquarters in Washington, D.C., the City of London, Paris, Kiev, Bangkok, Nairobi. According to its website, the organization is a nonprofit that supports independent media in over 100 countries. $500 million for a nonprofit, non-governmental organization. James, I think I saw some meme or tweets. It's like, how are you non-governmental if the government shutting off your funding means you can't do any more work? We train journalists and digital rights activists, advance internet freedom, and offer business expertise to help media outlets become financially stable. However, WikiLeaks suggested that some Internews Network activities may be linked to efforts to influence media narratives and regulate information flow on social media. During the World Economic Forum's 2024 annual meeting, Internews President Jean Bourgault called on the global advertising industry to back what she called the good news and information to deal with disinformation. Disinformation makes money. We need to follow that money. We can work really hard on inclusion lists or exclusion lists to sort of really try to focus ad dollars and challenge the global advertising industry all around the world to focus our ad dollars towards the good news and information. According to documents released by The Good News at WikiLeaks, Borgolt receives roughly $451,000 annually, nearly $500,000. She formerly worked for the U.S. Embassy in the evil Moscow and directed USAID's Office of Democratic Initiatives, according to her LinkedIn profile. I'm sure all that money couldn't have helped, the water in Flint, Michigan, or the people in Asheville, North Carolina, or East Palestine, Ohio, or how's Lahaina doing? Pretty good? In other awesome NGO news, USAID gifted a cement factory to Hamas. How $310 million in U.S. taxpayer money helped create Gaza terror tunnels. And the flashback, James, Joe, you originally put this up in May of 2018. NGOs are the deep state's Trojan horse. USAID is a deep state Trojan horse. Elon's Doge investigates feds whose net worths have exploded after we learned how much the fiery red Babylon killer Samantha Power. Sunstein 1. James, I didn't know Samantha Power and Cass Sunstein were a couple. I thought Alex Soros and Huma Abedin were the gross power couple. See? Always learning here on New World Next Week.
Yeah, the grossest power couples of the New World Order. We should start a new calendar or something. Anyway, yeah, all right. There's a lot going on here. The fact that $500 million has been sludged out through this censorship network to promote all this independent, non-governmental media around the world should not be surprising, I think, to our regular listeners. I wonder if it will be surprising to the general public. Unfortunately, I think this is going to be wrapped up in a left-right paradigm kind of thing, so it's all the Dems, and look, we got the Repubs in, and now they're stopping it all, so done. But, yeah, okay. Anyway, I have things to say about that, but the ending of the USAID monstrosity and its obvious propaganda arm is a good thing, so I'm not going to throw that baby out with the bathwater. You'll excuse me if I'm holding my breath for Rumble, for example. Peter Thiel funded, Howard Lutnick connected, top institutional holders, Cantor Fitzgerald, Vanguard, BlackRock, State Street. Yeah. I'm not necessarily thinking that we're going to avoid this falling into another censorship trap or at least a controlled media paradigm. But anyway, I think every time people wake up to the fact that their news, their thoughts, their opinions are being shaped and molded and controlled by a handful of very powerful, very rich, well-connected organizations, is probably to the good, because it means it will be harder to fool them the next time, or at least that's what I want to think. We'll see.
James, a week or so ago on one of my music shows, I do a live hour of news, I do a live hour of music DJing every day on the Media Monarchy streams. A week or so ago, playing a band, the Lumineers. I know I played them back when I was at the commercial FM station. Pretty small band, but they have that sound, they have that, that big FM kind of radio, rock radio sound, and I saw, their label. Their label's called Dual Tone, D-U-A-L-T-O-N-E, Dual Tone. I was like, oh, that's an indie label. They've been an indie for a while. And I had to go to Wikipedia and, of course, ruin things like the ruiner I am and go to Dual Tone Records. Oh, look. Oh, okay. Well, then now they're owned by this, blah, blah, generic sounding sort of holding company. Oh, I don't really know who that is. But I think I've said before, the right panel on Wikipedia entry, sometimes I just play the game of click through to their parent corporation, and they're owned by BlackRock. Not that the Lumineers or the bands on there are so politically punk and they would talk about black. They're not that. I think it just shows how mundane in some ways how much they own, that even kind of cool, scrappy indie folk rock record labels owned by BlackRock. Of course, also the thing I have to do to be a ruiner is go to Twitter and go, you guys are signed to BlackRock Records? I haven't gotten the reply tweet, though. Our final story on this New World Next Week, 581, I think is a really interesting one, James, and one that as we're learning all the releases of files from our new benevolent leaders here in the States, these things happen, and sometimes we find out 60, 70, 80 years later, or maybe sometimes we find out 5 years later. Critics say CDC grooming kids to fear pandemics through Operation Outbreak. Grabbing this from the hated children'shealthdefense.org. James, did you see Bernie trying to shame for the baby onesies on the RFKJ hearing? Good grief. We'll talk about that later. The Center for Disease Control and Prevention's educational resource for K through 12 students on disease outbreaks, the transmission of pathogens, and how to trace their spread on the surface appear well-intended. Critics, however, say the material, which includes lesson plans and classroom activities titled Operation Outbreak and a graphic novel targeting teens, also could be interpreted as propaganda designed to encourage compliance with public health policies and initiatives. The materials present hypothetical scenarios necessitating a public health response to the outbreak and spread of a disease with a zoonotic animal origin. Never from a lab. Students are asked to employ a One Health, they put One Health in quotes, One Health approach, and methods such as contact tracing to respond to these hypothetical outbreaks, snitching on your neighbors, ratting out people, freaking out and stuff. According to the materials, One Health recognizes that human health, animal health, and the environment are connected. The One Health approach, quote, requires human, animal, and environmental health professionals to work together at the local, state, federal, and global levels to improve the health of people, animals, and their shared environment. Dr. Michelle Perot, a pediatrician, said the CDC's educational initiatives appear to be well-intentioned educational efforts under the One Health framework. But instead, a closer examination suggests it may also serve to acclimate students to compliance during future public health crises. By emphasizing the inevitability of the next pandemic and reinforcing a specific perspective on zoonotic transmission, these materials can condition naive minds to accept certain public health policies without room for opposing discussions. This initiative prioritizes messaging over genuine scientific inquiry. If there's a scientific quote to sum up the scamdemic, that's it. This initiative prioritizes messaging over genuine scientific inquiry. Dr. Margaret Christensen, clinical educator, called the materials propaganda that groom the younger generation early to believe our biggest threat is from some disease jumping out of an animal, whether birds or cows or pigs, and attacking us without defense unless we've been vaccinated. According to attorney Sherry Snow Powers, the educational resources are intended to foster an uncritical attitude toward public health authorities. These materials are inappropriate for teenagers and children because they promote and idolize public health authorities as heroes and saviors. This is detrimental to young minds and conditions children to be future compliant citizens. At the RFKJ confirmation hearings, Bernie's big attack on RFKJ is that he sells baby onesies that say unvaxxed and unafraid. That's the worst thing. That's what you've got? I was waiting for Dr. Fauci to sue RFK over that evil book filled with all those lies. In really interesting related news, James, I kind of wanted this to maybe be its own standalone segment on this episode, but as we've noted, it is New Decade this week. Sinister new details about the CIA's mind control program. That latest from the Daily Mail. As the FBI finds secret JFK assassination records after the Trump order, James, you've probably seen a little bit of this. You've probably had people messaging it to you. They're releasing new documents, and the big grabby thing was one of the leaders of this, Trump appointee Florida Representative Anna Paulina Luna, talking about the JFK assassination. According to the latest info she's seen, quote, I believe there were 2 shooters. James?
Surprise, surprise. I'm just wondering why RFKJ is selling baby onesies. Anyway, I didn't see that. But, on the note of the CDC story here, I think grooming is the right context to put this in, because we understand what is happening here with the children. They are being indoctrinated from the earliest age to essentially be prepped for the next scamdemic and to understand it in a way that previous generations were not. Now, it's just, of course, the government's going to come in and lock everyone down and take away all your rights until you get vaxxed. That's just the way it is. And we all saw what happened a few years ago, right? So this is actually perhaps the most insidious part of the programming that we've been under for the past few years. With adults, whatever. You know, they're just brainwashed, unfortunate zombies at this point. But the children who are having their minds warped by this propaganda is truly concerning. And I think this speaks directly to what I was just talking about on my most recent edition of Solutions Watch, where I talked to Ernest Hancock about raising Generation Next. And we talked about this idea of public indoctrination system and how do you protect your children from this type of information, or at the very least arm them against it. And I actually just had an experience with that here in Japan, where my son was telling me about the SDGs and saving the Earth, and I had to inform him, this is not really about saving the Earth, son. And I just planted the seed in his head. You know, they jet around in their private jets to all these conferences telling you that you're terrible for driving your car to work. Isn't that a bit strange? And now my son is definitely thinking about that. So every parent, every person in a position to do so should be helping to educate the children on reality. And yes, to the extent that these types of indoctrination, grooming regimes can be stopped, I think we should do that.
Man, and you're right. They use it right there. Their term that we kind of use to describe them, that they took away from us to try and describe us, grooming, groomers. It happens on a bunch of levels. It's usually, of course, termed to be some sort of child sexual exploitation, but the mental happens first, man. Good grief. That's New World Next Week, episode 581, with a classic New World Next Week sigh. We run newworldnextweek.com. Power couples of the New World Order calendars are currently out of stock, but we do have shirts and hoodies and hats, and of course the DVDs and the USBs, and that keeps us fear-free and ad-free, and you've never heard an ad, you've never heard us pitching for some VPN or some new thing. And I always like to remind people. And James, I was going to say, you're talking about Generation Next. I always say Media Monarchy is for adults only. If you're letting your kid listen to it, man, that's on you. But maybe I'm secretly kind of stoked because I know they're listening to cool radio as a kid, and it's maybe going to have a big effect on them, like hearing radio for me as a kid had. Speaking of radio, I love to play the exclusive premiere of these New World Next Week episodes before either of us have published them. Only me, James, and Brock have heard them, and I play them after my Thursday morning monarchy. That's around 10 a.m. Mountain Time at MediaMonarchy.com/listen. James?
/listen. Yeah, when I find my kids in bed at night with a transistor radio under their pillow hiding it from me, I'll know who to blame. I will know what person did that. All right, James, I'm going to go crawl back into bed and hopefully sleep this bug off over the next day or two. As I say, I might not have a subscriber newsletter this weekend. I hope my dear subscribers will forgive me for that. But at any rate, I hope we will be back next week with more New Decade next week. Until then, James, thanks for your stories here.
Get well, buddy. Take care.